welcome to this second short video lesson on the influence of early attachment. Now for both Year 12s and Year 13s, this is the very last topic area of attachment. So for Year 12s, this is the last bit of content that you will need for your progression exam. For the Year 13s, we've pretty much had revision activities on all of your attachment content. So this is now the final bullet point, the influence of early attachment on both childhood and adult relationships. So, just a quick thinking question to get you started. Our early attachment experiences determine our later childhood and adult relationships. It's something that I've repeatedly gone back to through the attachment topic area, but in your own opinion, where would you place your agreement with that? Do you think that absolutely is the case, so 10, or do you think 1, not at all, that there are other more important factors? So just be mulling that over as we kind of working through this content. Where does your opinion lie on that scale in terms of how much your early attachment experiences have shaped your adult relationships? Okay, so into the first chunk of content. If you were writing a 16-mark question on this, which if you look in your little packs, there is, again, space for you to plan one of those. The first thing that you would need to be referring to here is Bowlby's theoretical ideas. And it is something that we've mentioned kind of all the way through the attachment topic, but Bowlby was quite keen to say that early attachments serve a lifelong purpose and have consequences into adulthood. They so Bowlby and his kind of colleagues suggest that the quality of that first primary attachment has an impact then on the quality of later attachments, i.e. the type of attachment that you are as a child will be reflected in your adult friendships and also your adult romances. And if you're not developing adequately as a child, so you're developing one of the insecure attachment styles as a child, that'll follow through with you into adulthood. Now, can you remember what this concept is known as? Just have a quick think in your head. The idea that what you are as a child follows through into adulthood. Do you know what that term is? It's continuity hypothesis. So be trying to use that idea, that term, in any of your answers going forward. So we make that statement about his thoughts about early attachment, and then we bring in the concept of the internal working model. So again, can you just in your head perhaps or on a board just define what the internal working model actually is? Just have a quick think to yourself, how would we phrase that? Remember, this would be worth 2 marks as a definition question in the exam. So we would normally say that it's a cognitive framework. If you use the term schema, that might look a little bit better to an examiner because a schema is a cognitive framework, but you have to get across what that schema is about. So it's about the world, the self and others, and it acts as a blueprint for all future relationships. You may want to add into your booklets or for Year 13s into your revision notes that it creates a schema about our expectations of other people in relationships. So for Year 12s, add that to page 42. For Year 13s, add that maybe to your own revision notes or summaries. And as I've said, you could get a 2-mark question on this, okay? But that's all stuff that you're all familiar with. What we're not familiar with at this point, because we haven't done it in any detail, is why and how the internal working model actually has such a powerful effect on future relationships. So this is where you would expand your AO1 content. And as I've said at the bottom, it would show elaborated knowledge and good use of key terminology. So for Year 12s, make this stand out in your booklet. For Year 13s, pinch some of these core ideas excuse me, so that you know what terms and phrases you need to be using to expand your ideas thoroughly. So the best way to do this is to refer to 2 different experiences side by side so you can see the impact of the different styles of attachment in childhood. So at the top we've got reference to a child whose first experiences are of a loving relationship with a primary caregiver. It is an attachment which is reliable, okay? So the caregiver is really consistent. That then allows the child to create expectations or assume that that's what a relationship should be like, that the person that you're in a relationship with should be reliable, they should be consistent. And if that's what the child gets in early childhood, then they will seek out functional or normal, for want of a better word, relationships in future, and also they will behave normally or functionally within that relationship. Okay, so it's about having a reliable experience of caregiving so that you know what to expect from a romantic partner, so you go out and find somebody who meets that criteria, but that you also act that same way yourself in that relationship. Whereas if we compare that to a child who's had a bad experience in their first attachment, for example, the parent has been inconsistent in terms of their care. They may have been excessively clingy and then kind of rejected the child, so real inconsistent in terms of what affection they're giving them. Then the child will seek out abnormal relationships in later life. They might struggle to form relationships because they don't know how to conduct intimacy in relationships, and also they'll probably behave in an inappropriate manner whilst they're in the relationships. So once you've stated what Bowlby's views are of early attachment and you've talked about the internal working model, you build this into your answer to say some examples of kind of generally speaking how it would have an effect. So beyond that, okay, we want to actually refer to the 3 early attachment styles, and you should all know by now what types of characteristics are typical of secure, avoidant and resistant children. So I would like you to add this to the bottom of the page for year 13s. Sorry, I've got a cough. For year 13s, pop this into your notes. Like I've said, you want to be able to show the examiner that you do appreciate and understand what the 3 attachment styles are in childhood, and then you're going to go on and say how they shape us as adults. So at the bottom of the page, just do a little table or just make some little notes. What are secure characteristics, what are avoidant, and what are resistant? So I'm not going to go through those. I think at this stage in attachment, you should all know what they are. So pause this here and just make some notes there. Okay, so at this stage, we're ready to move into the research. And as I said in the previous video, the word research on this style of question or this topic area means theoretical ideas, so Bowlby's theoretical ideas, but also research studies. So we've got 3 core studies for you to learn about here. The first 2, these 2 on the screen at the moment and listed in your booklet, are the impact of your attachment style on your early childhood relationships, so notably friendships. The third piece of research is to do with the effect on adult relationships. So we've got 2 different types of research, one for childhood experiences, one for adult relationships. So, first 2 studies then to do with impact on childhood friendships is Youngblood and Belsky, and then we've also got Myron, Wilson and Smith. So, if we read this together, you've got the 3 options at the bottom, okay? They can only be used once, all right, in the description of these studies. So, Youngblood and Belsky, which of the 3 attachment types do we think is going in this space here? So, they found that 3 to 5-year-old children who were something attached were more curious, competent, self-confident, and also got along better with other children. They were also, if you want to underline it, much more likely to form strong relationships. So of the 3, who would you think that would be in childhood? So go ahead and write that in if you feel confident, but it is securely attached children. More self-confident, able to form friendships, good, strong friendships, and quite curious young children. Okay, so that's between the ages of 3 and 5. Now, the next piece of research is to do with bullying behaviour. And what we know from research is that early attachment style does actually have a bearing on specifically bullying behaviour. Whether you are likely to be involved in it or not, whether you're likely to be the victim or whether you are actually likely to be a bully yourself. So which way round do we think these are going? Okay, so again, we've got secure, resistant and avoidant. They can only be used once in these three spaces. So they found that bullying behaviour could be predicted by attachment type. Something attached children were unlikely to be involved in at all in bullying. Insecure something were most likely to be the victims of bullying, whereas insecure something were more likely to be the bullies. So just take a moment, all right, either to yourself or maybe with your partners, which way do you think these are fitting in here? Okay, so we've already got that one filled in. Just be mulling it over for me. So I don't know whether you've got them the right way around, but securely attached children are unlikely to be involved at all, really, with bullying scenarios. And then the way that these two go in this description of the study, students often get it the wrong way round, but it is avoidants who are actually likely to be the victims of bullying. And that's because they tend to be quite isolated children because they're really independent. They don't kind of sit well with friendship groups, so they tend to like to play on their own, for example. And weirdly, it's the insecure resistants who are actually likely to be the bullies. And that might be because they've had really inconsistent experiences of parenting at home and they don't know how to have normal emotions. They don't know how to treat people normally because the parents have been really inconsistent with them beforehand, okay? So they don't know what's acceptable and what's not. So avoidance are normally the victims, resistance are normally the bullies. So that's the two research studies for the effect on childhood friendships. If you filled that in your booklet, we're now going to move beyond the effect on childhood and into the effect on adulthood. So we've got our final core study for the attachment topic, which is Hazen and Shaver in 1987, known as the Love Quiz. Now for year 12s, you've got this study on page 43 in your booklets. So I would probably pause this video here and just have a good read of the research study. For the year 13s, it might be an idea for you to do a little mind map or just a little brain drain of everything that you can remember potentially about this particular study before we go through it. So everybody just pause it for a second. 12s, read it. Year 13s, what do you remember? Okay. So that should have been enough time for you to just hopefully read through the study and get some core details kind of noted into your memory. But this was initially, I want to draw your attention to the fact that it was a volunteer sample. So they were advertising for participants in a local newspaper. There were 620 respondents in total, and this was a study to investigate the impact of early attachment on adult romantic relationships. So in the advertisement and what they were answering questions on was split into two separate parts. Part one asked them to recall what their attachment style was with their parents, i.e. what was the relationship like in their early childhood. Part two, which I've printed out for you, so you may want to have a look at that, is the questions about their adult romantic relationships. So again, if you want to pause this video here, you could have a go at answering the Hazen and Shaver's Love Quiz. I know some of you may not have been in a romantic relationship at this point in your adolescence, but you can imagine, based on maybe your friendships, how you would respond. So pause this and take a moment to fill in that love quiz. So these are questions from part two of the love quiz, questions about their adult romantic relationships. So pause that there and just have a go at responding to those 36. Okay, So if you've had a look through those questions, all right, we're going to have a look at what the typical responses were based on the attachment styles that the participants were categorised into. Now, I did say already that there were 620 respondents to this advertisement for the love quiz. And one of the first core findings that Hazen and Shaver reported was that there was some sort of symmetry between the attachment styles that were reported in their love quiz with the original strange situation. There is marginal differences, it's not identical, but there is symmetry, absolutely. So securely attached was the most common, with 56% being securely attached. Insecure avoidance was a slight increase from the original strange situation, so that was 25%, and insecure resistance was the lowest at 19%. So like I said, there was some symmetry with the strange situation, but what they also found, if you want to make this stand out either in your notes or in the booklet, was a positive correlation between attachment type in early childhood and then the love relationship experiences that they had later on in their adulthood. So Hazen and Shaver used this as evidence of continuity hypothesis. What you are or how strongly you are a particular type of attachment, so for example type B in childhood, positively correlates with how strongly you are securely attached in your adult life. So that's why we refer to it as correlational data, because it's all on scales, okay? So with regards to those scales, I want to just show you some of the statements that A's, B's and C's would have agreed with. So if you look back at the original 36 questions, these are some of the questions that they would have ticked that they agree with. And remember, it's all scaled. So for type A's, they would have stated potentially, and you can check whether this applies to you, that they want to remain quite independent in a relationship. And to a certain extent, they prefer to be alone. Whilst you want your partner to be close to you, so you want a relationship, you want to keep them at arm's length. So a lack of intimacy, perhaps. You tend to not open up to your partner and sometimes appear a bit emotionally distant or vacant. So double check your own responses now. How many of the avoidant responses do you think you have selected? It may be an idea as well, guys, just to pop some notes into your booklet. There's no space as such for this, but it's always a good idea to just have some extra knowledge. Same goes with year 13s who are revising this material. For the type Bs, so people who were categorised as a secure adult attachment or adult relationship, they will have selected and like I say, it's all scaled, but they would have normally selected these on quite a strong level, some of these statements. So they're warm in a relationship, they're quite loving, it comes naturally to them, problems are taken in the stride, you tend to share problems and deal with them with your partner, you can speak to each other effectively, so you've got good communication. So again, have you ticked a number of the secure options, or do you strongly agree with those secure options? And then type C's resistance. You want to be close. Obviously, I've taught you always before that the type C in resistant is often, in my mind, used to indicate clingy behaviour. So they fear being left by their partner, and if they're not close to you at all times, then you kind of worry. Relationships consume large amounts of emotional energy because you're always worried about what your partner's doing, on how they're responding to you. You're worried about their mood, for example. You really take things to heart. You're quite overly sensitive and you respond irrationally in a lot of relationship situations. So which ones do you think you are? And add some of those into your booklet so you get a good understanding of the types of statements that these people would have responded to or selected on that love quiz. Okay, pause here, just take a moment to do that. So the next thing that we need to do is actually write in the findings of the Hazen and Shaver table, okay? So it says on page 60 here, but I believe it's page 44 in your booklet. Now, these are all of the findings, so I'm going to give you a moment to pause it and just have a look through these and see which ones you think would be the findings for type A, B, C. So just pause this and then I will reveal the right answers in a moment. Okay, so the correct responses then, and make sure we add in these to the table on page 44. For type B, which was again 56% of all adults were securely attached, they reported friendly, happy, romantic relationships. They tend to have longer relationships on average, and these were the least likely to have gotten divorced. Okay, so very accepting of romantic partners, long partnerships, no divorce or very little divorce, happy, friendly romances. If we compare that to type A, avoidance, these, as we've already said, tend to fear intimacy. They tend to be quite jealous of romantic partners and were more likely to report that they got along fine by themselves and didn't necessarily need that intimacy from a romantic relationship. Type Cs, again, on the other hand, are more likely to be very obsessive in a romance. They are experiencing at all times extreme attraction, but also extreme jealousy, so fearful of what the partner is doing. And these are also the people that are likely to have the highest rates of divorce and thus the shortest relationships. So pause this again, get the table on page 44 filled in. If you're a year 13, keep your notes going, all right, plan that 16 marker. Now, it would be interesting just for you to have a think about whether continuity hypothesis is apparent in yourself. Do you know what you were like as a child? And then in terms of your adult romantic relationships, what are the characteristics? Just slide this back or look back at your notes. What do you think your characteristics are like as an adult? And is that reflective of what you were like as a child? Do you think we would get that same positive correlation that Hazen and Shaver found? Just have a quick chat about that or just mull it over in your own mind. Do you think you would buck the trend? So something has happened in your childhood, adolescence where you've changed your attachment style, or do you think the continuity hypothesis has kind of got legs? Is it a valid concept? Okay, close your booklets up, turn your notes over. We're just going to do another quick quiz. You can either do it on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, or just do it in your head as we're going through these questions, but just making sure that we've understood the content thus far. So which of the following is the correct definition for an internal working model? The correct option is statement 2, so it's a cognitive framework. Hopefully you're getting into the habit of saying schema as well, a blueprint for our future relationships. What does the number 56% represent in this area? So 56 is the proportion of respondents to the love quiz who had a secure attachment type in adulthood. What type of behaviour in childhood could be predicted by an attachment type? So just have a think, what have we said? Hopefully you've got this. Bullying behaviour. So securely attached children are unlikely to be involved. Which attachment type was most likely to be the bully? Can you recall that? So that is resistance. Spot the errors. So there are 3 in total. Okay, first error. Youngblade and Belsky didn't find that 3 to 5-year-old securely attached children were less likely to form strong friendships. They were more likely. Hazen and Shaver did not analyse 100 replies. They analysed 620 replies, and those replies were not online. They were published in a newspaper. Which attachment type is linked to being most likely to get divorce? It is resistance, because they're chaotic and highly jealous. And now we're at the opportunity then to have a look at the evaluation content for the effects of early attachment. Now, I've said to shut your booklets because we're going to go through this first, okay, together, and then you can open them up and hopefully fill that in. Again, with Year 13s revising this, you obviously need to participate in this task and see if you know what kind of goes into the spaces, but be selecting your evaluation points for any 16 marker that you might choose to do here. Okay, so first evaluation point is that there is evidence that actually backs up Hazen and Shaver's original findings. So Kirkpatrick and Hazen in 1994, so this was a short while after Hazen and Shaver, which were conducting research kind of mid to late 80s. They observed over a 4-year period that avoidant individuals were most likely to be dating something at the same time. Now, have a think of what might go in there. Okay. If you look at the conclusion, it might give you a bit better of an indication. So they're more likely to be dating something at the same time. This means that the link between attachment styles and romantic partner choice is valid, showing that avoidants actually do fear intimacy and are therefore less likely to have something adult relationships. What point do you think we are trying to make here? What do you think avoidants are more likely to do because they fear intimacy? So have a quick chat about it and we'll see if we can get these popped in. So when you go back into the booklets in a moment, what you're going to be saying here is that avoidant individuals are actually likely to be dating multiple partners at the same time because they don't tend to have long-lasting intimate relationships with one person. They tend to date several people all at once. This therefore shows that the link between the two is valid. Avoidants do fear intimacy, and actually they're less likely to have a monogamous adult relationship where they're not faithful to one person and commit to them on the long term. So they are likely to date multiple people and unlikely to have monogamous relationships. Moving into the first criticism, the research fails to establish cause and hopefully you all know that that is effect. So this is because correlational studies simply reveal again, hopefully we all know that word, a relationship. We cannot claim that early attachment types cause later relationship styles. An alternative explanation for the findings is that both attachment type and later relationships, the two together, are caused by something else entirely, like your individual temperament. Nobody ever builds that in. They say that it's all to do with your parents and the way that they reared you and the early attachment styles. But what happens if it's just your innate personality to have that kind of a relationship? Your parents may well be the most consistent parents that we've ever seen, really affectionate, really loving, really stable, encouraging independence, for example. But sometimes a child just has the temperament where they want to be independent and they don't want to be in a group of people all of the time. That's their temperament, that's their personality, and it's actually nothing to do with the way that the parents have raised them and the attachment style that they've encouraged on their child, because the child is always going to just develop their own relationship style. So thus, we haven't got cause and effect, and therefore it's not necessarily a truly valid idea that attachment does influence later relationships, because temperament or personality, if you wanted to add it into your booklet later, is an extraneous variable. It's something that we're not factoring in. Furthermore, Hazen and Shaver's research is retrospective. So we have come across this word before To be retrospect means to look back, okay? So the Hazen and Shaver study, that study itself, was asking participants to rely on their memories of their childhood relationships with their parents. Now, obviously, depending on what's happened in your childhood, that could then skew your memories. So, for example, if you've had bad experiences with your parents in adolescence or in adulthood, it may well taint your memories of what your childhood relationships were like, and thus the information that you give, all right, is not necessarily valid because you've been skewed by, number one, just having to look back and memories fade, but number two, it may well have changed based on your experiences with your parents going into later life. So to try and establish some valid data of your attachment type based on you just looking back, it's not quite right. So we might want to add to our booklet that memories do decay and fade, but as I've already said, they're open to distortion as well, and they can often be distorted based on your experiences of your parents later on in life. So it reduces the validity of the theory because the data itself is unreliable. What you're saying is inconsistent. And then finally, there are some contradictory findings which go against the notion of continuity hypothesis. So before you turn over the page, if you know it, fantastic, but if you don't, reread the evaluation of Bowlby and find the Zimmerman study, and you should be able to complete those remaining spaces. So if you want to just do that. For the year 13s, that might be quite difficult if you haven't revised Bowlby recently, but he assessed children at the age of 12 to 18 months and then went back to them again at the age of 16 and used questionnaires to determine the relationship that the child had had with its parents. And what they actually found was that childhood attachment was not a good predictor of later relationships, but that life events such as trauma and parental divorce was actually having a much greater impact. So again, we've said with the previous point that this means that the theory really is unreliable because it's inconsistent. This shows that exact same point, that not everybody is affected in the exact same way. So thus the theory itself is unreliable. You can't use it to make adequate predictions about everybody's adult experiences being affected by their childhood. So it's inconsistent. It's thus an unreliable explanation. So that's all of the evaluation content covered. Year 12s, I would now recommend opening your booklets back up and seeing if you can fill in the blanks based on what we've said in the video, rather than just kind of filling them in as we went through. Can you remember those points? So just going to skip through that. You can go back and answer those couple of questions if you want to, but I'm just going to draw your attention now in the last few minutes of this video to some key exam questions that you might get asked in this area. It might be useful to make a note of these onto the back page of your booklet or onto a separate page. So we've got outline what research has shown about the link between early attachment and adult relationships. Obviously there's no credit for procedures, so it would just be the findings of Hazen and Shaver, but you might also be able to refer to Kirkpatrick and Hazen, which we've just done in the evaluation content about the type A adults, so you could refer to those. And then the second study, evaluate research into the influence of early attachment. So this has all got to be methodology related points, so you've got to make it really nice and applied. It's got to be talking about the fact that it's retrospective and the issues that there are with that, and make that work for attachment, and then also the fact that it's correlational. But everything has got to be about the influence of early attachment, okay? Can't just give bog standard methodology points there. It's got to be in the context of this theory. Now, you've all got this question in your pack, which I would like you all to do, and then you've just got space to do a 16-mark essay plan as well. But this question was really quite tough, okay? So we're going to read through the stimulus together first. I'm going to give you the opportunity to write out an answer, and then we're going to mark it up and see if you've got anything missing therefore, okay? So Abby had a happy, secure childhood with parents who loved her very much. She now has two children children of her own and loves them very much too. The two children make friends easily and are confident and trusting. Referring to Abby and her family, explain what psychologists have discovered about the internal working model. Okay, so looking at that, what type of an attachment do we think Abby has got? Can you bring in some ideas about the internal working model and the effect that it's had on her and then also her children after her? Can you build in any research findings as well? So pause this, okay, write out an answer, and then we will have a look and you can add on anything that you were missing, okay, and maybe change your answer. But I want an original attempt from you all, please, and then in a different coloured pen you can add on the extra stuff. So pause this here and give this question a go. Okay, so if we again look at the stimulus, all right, we should have been able to pull out some core ideas, all right, that we should have been including in your answer. So first and foremost, we can see here that Abby, I'm just highlighting the key parts of the question here, guys. So Abby is a type B. It says that she's happy and she's secure in her childhood. She has got parents who love her very much, which is our first reference to an internal working model, because she's got a cognitive framework for future relationships. It tells us what Abby's expectations would be, because her parents love her very much and they're quite consistent and secure in the way that they deal with her. Her expectations would be for a romantic relationship where her partner loves her very much and she loves them back. So that would be her expectations. At that point, you could bring in continuity hypothesis, because now Abby has two children of her own and loves them very much too. So it's clearly shaped her romantic relationships, and then she's gone on and had that relationship with her own children. Okay, so her adult relationships have been a continuation of her primary attachment, and then that's followed into her relationship with her own children, and then her children go on to develop secure attachments, and it's passing down the generations. Her children are able to make friends easily and are confident and trusting. So this is one big continuity kind of loop, okay? So that's how we would talk about the internal working model, continuity hypothesis, and this notion of a type B attachment being passed on to the children. Now, within that, you obviously have got to be referring to Abby and her family. So we've picked up several points that you could do that. But then you could also refer to psychologists, because it says that in the question. So you may well have been able to cram into your answer a little bit about Hazen and Shaver. So maybe at the end of your response, you could have been saying that Hazen and Shaver found that there was a positive correlation between those who were securely attached in childhood and those who had secure romantic relationships in adulthood. This is demonstrated in the case of Abby as well. So that's quite a stretch, but it does present to you the idea that you could refer to research findings. Now, if we just have a look at where you think your original answer would fall initially, be honest with yourself so that when I come in tomorrow I can double check kind of where you all were to begin with. Are you a level 1, so you've got very limited reference to the internal working model? Do you think you've done enough for level 2, so some understanding, some application, but there's maybe room for improvement, a bit more key ideas? Or do you think you nailed it straight away on the first go and put yourself into level 3? Now, the mark scheme for this question is basically in order of difficulty, okay? So the bullet points listed, the first few, I would expect all of us to get those, all right? So the first 3, but then up to bullet point 4 is where it starts to get a little bit tougher. So read your own response now. Have you referred to those first 3 bullet points? And then have you got any of the latter ones? If you haven't, you might want to just pinch some of these ideas. So I would imagine that most of you have said that an attachment gives a child an internal working model. You're probably going to have said that Abby's secure attachment in childhood has created a positive internal working model, and that model will give her a set of expectations or a template of how to behave in future relationships. But have you made this point that then is continuity hypothesis, and that same type of relationship will be reflected across the future generations? Her understanding of relationships has been carried forward, so now she has a positive, secure relationship with her 2 children, and then her own children are able to go away and make friends easily. Have you fully expanded on that idea, or have you just give it minimal reference to begin with? And then, as I've said, any reference to Hazen and Shaver would also be credit worthy, but it is quite difficult, okay? Have you done the most difficult expected point from the mark scheme? So that question, I think, is a real hard style question to pick up the full 6 out of 6. So just be mindful of what the examiner is actually looking for there. So the final style of question that I want you to all have a go now at doing, hopefully you've got enough time left in the lesson to do this. If not, you can just do it as like a mind map, a plan to begin with, and then I'll set this maybe as a follow-up DIL task. But discuss research into the influence of early attachment on childhood and or adult relationships. So I've listed on the left-hand side what the examiner's report stated. So I would like you all, excuse that, Amazon telling me that my payment's not working. I would like you all to have a read of what some of the issues were with this question, because I don't want any of you to fall into the trap of making those common errors. So have a read of the examiner's report, and then I've also given you the mark scheme, which I think is quite clear and obvious what we were expecting to be included here, but then you need to spend a little bit of time of what exactly you would include, what evaluation points you would include, and where you would pitch your answer. Remember, there's very few people that get into level 4 for 16 mark answers. Some people can do it because they're really good at writing evaluation points, but if you are aiming to get into level 3, 9 or 10 marks, you could easily be coming out with a B or an A. So if we're trying to aim for the top of level 2 into level 3, I think that's a very good starting point for the vast majority of you. So like I say, if you don't have enough time left in the lesson to do a detailed plan for this, you should still have enough time, bearing in mind the duration of these videos, to just make a bullet pointed plan. Okay, so there you are, guys. That's your 2 video lessons for the remaining content. Okay.